Imagine being told by your own parents that you were an embarrassment, not worthy of carrying their family name. Imagine being kicked out of your own home by the very people who were supposed to protect you, left to start over with nothing. That was my reality. My father's words cut deeper than any knife when he told me I wasn't up to the standards of his wealthy family. But years later, the same family who threw me out would find themselves on their knees, begging me for help. If you've ever dreamed of karma serving itself cold to those who wronged you, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick with me, because this is one of the most satisfying stories of revenge, validation, and poetic justice you'll ever hear. When I was younger, I never fit into my family's world. My parents lived in a mansion that always smelled like polished wood and expensive perfume. Their parties were full of laughter, but not the warm kind, the kind that came from power and money. My father was a businessman with a reputation for crushing competitors. My mother, she was the perfect hostess, with a smile that could cut glass. And me, I was Rachel, the black sheep. The quiet daughter who preferred books over designer handbags, dreams over social climbing. My grades were decent, my ambitions were different, but to them, I was nothing but a disappointment. It all came to a breaking point one night. I had just turned 19, and my father was throwing yet another extravagant party. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, because I never liked the spotlight. As I passed by, I overheard him whisper to one of his colleagues, "She's not up to the standards of this family. She's weak, an embarrassment." Those words burned into me like acid. Later that night, when I tried to stand up for myself, his anger exploded. He told me to pack my things, that I was no longer welcome in his house. My mother just stood there in silence, her eyes darting away. And just like that, I was out. No money, no plan, just a duffel bag and a heart that felt shattered into pieces. The first few years were brutal. I rented a tiny studio apartment in the rough part of town. The walls were thin, the heater rattled all night, and sometimes I had to choose between paying for food or keeping the lights on. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count. But inside all that pain, a fire started to grow. I promised myself one thing: if my parents saw me as worthless, I'd prove them wrong. I took small jobs to survive, waitressing, tutoring, even scrubbing floors. But on the side, I studied. I spent endless nights teaching myself coding and software development on a second-hand laptop that barely worked. I devoured every free resource I could find, pouring myself into building skills no one could ever take away from me. It wasn't glamorous. I ate ramen noodles until I couldn't stand the taste. I wore shoes with holes in them. But every time I remembered my father's voice calling me a failure, I worked harder. Then came the break. I developed a small app to help students organize their studies. At first, it was nothing, a pet project, something I shared online for free. But word spread, people started downloading it, and then, investors started calling. Fast forward 5 years, and that little app had turned into a full-blown tech company. Offices, employees, partnerships. The kind of success I used to dream about. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the black sheep anymore. I felt powerful, independent, worthy, but the universe wasn't done with me yet. One day, out of nowhere, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but when I picked up, I heard a voice I hadn't expected in years, my mother. Her tone was shaky, almost desperate. She said they needed to see me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a cafe, the same one I used to walk by when I couldn't even afford a cup of coffee. They looked different, older, smaller. My father, once so intimidating, now sat slouched, his eyes sunken. And then came the confession. His empire, the business he had built on ruthlessness and pride, was collapsing. Bad deals, lawsuits, financial ruin. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. The cars were gone, the wealth that once defined them had evaporated. And then, the kicker. They needed me. They wanted me to invest in his company, to save the family name. My father couldn't even look me in the eyes when he asked. My mother tried to soften it with tears, saying they had nowhere else to turn. For a moment, I felt that old ache in my chest. That little girl who had begged for their approval. But then another voice inside me spoke louder. The one that had pushed me through sleepless nights and endless struggles. I leaned forward, looking straight at my father, and asked him, "Do you remember the night you told me I wasn't up to the standards of this family?" He froze. His jaw tightened. My mother's lips quivered. I smiled, not with cruelty, but with finality. "You were right. I'm not up to your standards. I've surpassed them. I stood up, placed $100 bill on the table for their coffees, and walked out. No promises. No investments. No saving grace. Just the sound of my heels clicking on the floor as I left behind the ghosts of a family who had once left me behind. That moment was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every meal skipped. To see the man who had called me a failure now sitting across from me, powerless and desperate, begging for my help. It was justice in its purest form. The tables had turned, and this time, I was the one who held the power. Sometimes revenge isn't about shouting or gloating. Sometimes it's about quietly becoming everything they said you couldn't. My parents wanted me gone, forgotten, erased. Instead, I became the one person they couldn't ignore. That's the real victory. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever seen? And of course, don't forget to subscribe, because we've got plenty more stories of karma, revenge, and poetic justice coming your way.